Okay, so Mark, this is the video I've been waiting to record with you. There are efforts by Republican state officials in both Ohio and Alabama to keep Joe Biden off the ballot in November. So what was their argument here, and how seriously should we take these threats by these Republicans in charge in those states?
I mean, this is really quite a study of hypocrisy. You know, for years and years and years, I mean, going back, you have the two parties that have their conventions in the summer. And there's actually, believe it or not, some measure of coordination between the two, right? One needs to go earlier and one needs to go later by definition. And you don't want them obviously overlapping with one another. The media wants to be able to cover each of them separately. It's actually in their candidates' interest to have them covered separately. So inevitably, one of these conventions is in July and one of these conventions is in August. Now, to get on the ballot, to have your name put on the ballot as a major party candidate, every state makes you fill out some basic paperwork. If you're the Democratic Party, saying who's your candidate. If you're the Republican Party, who's your candidate. And you submit this paperwork in advance to print their ballots. And inevitably, there's always some glitch with some state law about the timing of the paperwork, or sometimes actually it's even like the timing of when the arena is free, or there'll be like a local ordinance that like doesn't allow noise after a certain hour. And there's always been a bipartisan understanding that if there's something that a Democratic mayor needs to fix, for example, to make sure the buses run later for the Republican convention, they do it. If there's something the Republicans need to do to fix a law, they do it. And in any event, this year for the Democratic convention, which is in August, Alabama and Ohio took the position that, oh, wait, I'm sorry, the conventions are too late for you to submit the paperwork for our ballots. And that attitude is, even in today's highly polarized world, really extraordinary and actually in an incredibly bad form.
And so I guess, what is the result? Do we have any resolution here? Does it look like they're going to be amenable to some change, or are they really going to dig in their heels here and just try to keep the sitting president off the ballot in these two states? So
interestingly, you saw kind of interesting politics here, because initially both secretaries of state were like, you're out of luck. The DNC, the Biden campaign proposed a number of reasonable compromises, like, hey, how about we give you provisionally the names of our candidates so that, you have them.
You might have heard of him. His name is Joe Biden. Right, exactly. He's the president of the United States.
Yeah, exactly, right? And then we'll firm it up afterwards. And initially their answer was no. And it now looks like both Ohio and Alabama's legislatures are going to take the steps necessary to fix this so that this will not be, there won't be an issue. If it had been an issue, honestly, the Biden campaign and the DNC could have sued and overturned this nonsense, which would have wasted another lawsuit, and the taxpayers would have had to defend this lawsuit if you're in those two states, or they could have found another way to do a technical nomination in advance.
Now, to what extent do you think that these efforts are kind of testing grounds to see what Republicans can get away with? Because there was a ton of backlash here, but how do we know that they're not just testing the fence, so to speak, to see where it's weakest? And if they could have sneaked by, they would have.
Oh, they're definitely testing the fence. I don't think there's any question in my mind that this was not their initial position was to see what the public reaction would be and how hard the Biden campaign would push. And I think there were two reasons why they wanted to test it. The first is, in Ohio in particular, I think the Ohio Republicans thought, well, let's just take a shot and see if he just takes a pass and doesn't need to be on the ballot. And that would have dramatically negative consequences in the Senate race, right? So I think that's part. But the bigger point, and I think this is the one that you're getting at, and it's something, I've written about on Democracy Docket and we've covered on Democracy Docket, is that you essentially have the Republican Party constantly trying to move the goalposts of what norms they can break. And so if they can break a norm, they want to break it because it gives them more running room for the next norm they want to break, right? So this time it's a law that, might keep them off the ballot. The next time, maybe it's a law that, lets them treat his name as printed on the ballot differently, in smaller font or, on the second page, right? So I always think you got to always look at all of these rules changes that the Republicans are doing, or all of these places where they violate norms, as them trying to figure out what they can get away with, not just for that one instance, but for what it means for other things that they may care more about.
Or to that point, to try to normalize this stuff so that they can try the same thing 2 or 3 times. And maybe the backlash was swift and severe the first time, but a little bit more muted the second time, a little bit more muted than that the third time, because now we've gotten used to the extremism. And so they're just kind of banking on the fact that if they do the extremism enough times, then people will kind of tire of screaming about it.
I think that's right. I also think it gives a talking point to the MAGA conspiracy theorists. I don't want to give them any ideas, but I am sure there will be a ballot truther, movement now. Joe Biden wasn't really eligible for the ballot because, of the dates. Right. It just feeds an overall effort by the Trump world to suggest that, the Democrats are not on the up and up, and, seeing how far Republicans can get away with rigging the rules.
And you had mentioned that this was covered extensively in Democracy Docket. That's where I got my info from this. So for those watching right now, if you want to follow along with everything that's happening in this world that Mark is in right now, please sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the free news outlet he founded to focus on everything voting and elections. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Mark, do you think that attempts like these are kind of retribution for Democrats rightly employing a system intended to keep insurrectionists off the ballot in accordance with the 14th Amendment?
I think that there's an element of Republicans that would say that that's what it is. That, essentially they would say Democrats tried to keep Trump off the ballot, so we're doing this. I think that is, first of all, there's no comparing. It's really apples and oranges. One involved the former president in inciting an insurrection in the nation's capital to try to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. The second involves literally the DNC working in cooperation with the RNC to make sure the two conventions are spaced out properly. So it's a crazy analogy to draw, but I also kind of don't buy it. I think the Republicans are going to test that fence regardless of what the Democrats do. They're not going to operate in good faith. And I think that we just sort of, in one sense, I think we kind of need to take this as an opportunity to internalize that. There's no norm that Donald Trump will abide by because he feels what, I owe that to the Democrats to operate in good faith. They will operate in bad faith if they see any advantage to do so.
By the way, which is a reason that we shouldn't extend efforts of goodwill, because they will never be met with reciprocation by Republicans. So anytime Democrats try to say like, okay, well, let's just do this for Republicans because it's a show of good faith, we're giving them something that we're not going to get back.
Yeah, I mean, look, I want to tell, I don't have a position one way or the other whether, if Speaker Johnson winds up in trouble, Democrats ought to save him or not. The one reason why I would not save him is that you think that somehow they would return the favor. Like, right, Republicans
exactly.
will never return the favor. They will never do the right thing because it's the right thing, and they'll never do something because they feel like, it's what Democrats did for us.
Yeah. If Trump was kicked off the ballot in accordance with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, do you think that we would have seen these efforts in Ohio and Alabama actually succeed and to do so in far more states than just those two?
Maybe. I mean, look, you might have had Republicans engage in retribution if Donald Trump had been kicked off the ballot. But I think that in some sense, asking that question is asking the wrong question, because I assume Republicans would do whatever they could do to begin with. But also,
regardless, yeah.
Right, regardless. But it also sort of, I think, by the way, unfortunately, we may see this in the Supreme Court decision about the immunity question. Like, one would have assumed if he had been kicked off the ballot, it was because the majority of the Supreme Court decided that it was going to apply the Constitution as written, and therefore there would be no way to kick Biden off the ballot, right? Like, there couldn't be retribution because there would be what we used to colloquially refer to as the rule of law, something that conservatives on the courts used to care a lot about, right? Yeah. And so we're seeing, I think, a belief now that anything goes in terms of Republican retribution, in part because the courts have kind of started to rule in a way that suggests to the American public that maybe it's just all political, like maybe it's not rule of law.
Yeah, well, kind of like how the so-called textualists have just watched somebody incite an insurrection and give aid or comfort to an insurrection. In fact, giving aid or comfort to insurrectionists has become a plank of his platform, and yet that guy was just, allowed carte blanche to do exactly that. So much for originalism. Mark, does the fact that this is happening, does the fact that yet another instance where Republicans could test the fence, does this worry you moving forward that they're figuring out more and more different ways where they can allow themselves to kind of tear down the system in deference to their party or to their political benefit?
Absolutely. Look, let me tell you what has me most worried right now is I understand why there is so much interest in the Donald Trump criminal trial in New York. I genuinely do. I mean, I'm interested in it. It's historic. It's all of that. But, they're testing the fence while, frankly, a lot of people are not watching the fence, right? They are watching the TV screen with the 30th talking head talking about what the testimony of David Pecker meant. And in the meantime, things like what we're seeing in Ohio and Alabama take place. The voter suppression that you and I talk about takes place. Like, the Republicans are not fixated just on that one thing. They are recruiting 100,000 challengers. Laura Trump went on TV and said, we're going to have our people handling the ballots, right? And that's would be a massive violation of state law. And so I'm worried, candidly, that while we're watching one screen, they've got a whole bunch of screens set up in there, and we've got to make sure we are watching the fence as well.
Yeah, and that's a major reason that, I'm appreciative, and I know our audience is appreciative of being able to talk to you about this stuff, because I actually do think that, we kind of deride the crazies in that party, the Donald Trumps and the Kari Lakes and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, but I think that the more serious and pernicious folks in the Republican Party kind of understand that those people redound to their benefit, because while all eyes are trained on Marjorie Taylor Greene doing her circus act in the parking lot of Congress, they can get away with doing the stuff that Steve Bannon is trying to get through, trying to push through, efforts to harass poll workers and election vigilantism and voter suppression and reducing the number of precincts in minority majority communities and on. And so I think this kind of ecosystem, they've figured out a way to rely and need the crazies in that party, because it gives them cover to do what they need to do under the cloak of darkness.
Yeah, and this is actually a very smart point you made to me, so I want to give you credit. I asked the question several weeks ago, going back now, why would the RNC, at the same time that it's hiring Charlie Spees, who is like a well-respected, lawyer, and, brought in Bill McGinley to be their outside counsel, who, worked in the Trump administration, but, has a long pedigree as a lawyer. Why would they also have brought in Christina Bobb, right? Doesn't that undercut the message? And I think your basic point to me, and this may not have been an episode, this may have been off camera, but your basic point to me is like, no. Actually, that's the perfect pairing, because she is dealing with elements of the base and the crazies that actually they also want to have going. It's not an either or. There's actually a synergy to the two.
It is Thursday, the 2nd of May of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious the little Yorkie is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, only a little, because some people don't like it too spicy. And they might also be the ones who put raisins in the potato salad, so don't do that. Don't. Alrighty, still suffering the tidal forces of grief, so bear with me. I know the process. It was much more profound when my adult son passed, but I don't know. I still keep seeing my poor mom on the floor after I'd after I rolled her over and grabbed a towel to staunch the blood coming out of the eyebrow above her left eye. And, another one of those processes is playing that tape loop over and over, and I know one shouldn't do it, but I'll be sleeping, and I'll dream it, okay? I know. Control the dream. But anyway, she just looked so helpless, but at the same time was willing to joke with me a little bit, because that's my mom. But when the EMTs got there, before they got there, and I was still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher lady, she was squinting her eyes open, not really squinting them tight, but kind of squinting them and then opening them really wide. So, obviously, the brain bleed was happening. And then as I go over that tape loop again, I realized that when the EMTs and fire people got there and they were asking her the standard questions, before her name, she kind of slurred a little bit. Like her tongue got heavy and you're kind of talking underneath the tongue. And I remember that, and just for that split second, I decided to disregard that maybe it was just something else. But then when she couldn't remember her name and she responded to Mom. Now let me tell you some inside baseball here. We used to call out for her in the middle of the night. Mom, I want a drink of water, Mom. She hated being called Mom. Especially over and over and over. But, I still called her Mom. I love you, Mom. She responded to Mom and looked at me. I said, "Isn't your name Pat?" And I wouldn't say it was vacant. It was one of those, I don't know. So it's hard. It just makes me feel so sad because she was such a great mom, and in those moments, last moments, she was a frail old lady. And at least there was this solace. She wasn't an old lady out on the street. I'd see old ladies out on the street and think, that could be my mom. How could anybody let their mom be like that? Maybe they weren't moms, but, in my limited view of the world, I thought everybody had a mom. Everybody does, but you know what I mean. So how could anyone leave a helpless person like that? It just bothered my sense of right and wrong. So I guess there's that in her helplessness and weakness and frailty and uncertainty. She wasn't alone. There were still people who loved and knew her, even if that was slipping away from her consciousness. I suppose in this realm, I don't know what to think about the afterlife anymore. I suppose it could just be a void, no consciousness. And I will say that I've rectified myself to that. Hey, what's wrong with just transferring whatever nutrients and whatever to this world and then to the cosmos beyond? I mean, after all, we're stardust to begin with. We'll be stardust again. Dust to dust. Ashes to ashes. But it's always nice to think that we'll see our friends and family in the great beyond, and we'll all have a grand, joyous time. What age will we see each other at? Will Mom be the little girl dancing the jig for her grandfather at the age of 3? Maybe. So, excuse me for going on, but why don't I once again center myself and give you a rundown on what we have in store for you here in this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And the Bistro Cafe, I suppose, technically is the salon, and the Speakeasy is past the chef's table out back. Okay. Well, there is that major update on the Republican effort to keep Joe Biden off the November ballot in Ohio and Alabama. These people are so transactional. That whole, Trump has already come out many, many years ago, before he's even on The Apprentice. His strategy is what he learned from Roy Cohn. Someone hits you, you hit him 10 times harder. So there was an attempt to keep him off the ballot for being a goddamn insurgent traitor who incited an insurrection against the United States of America and violently tried to overthrow the peaceful transfer of power. And these people want to keep Joe Biden off the ballot because paperwork? All right. I know. Get back. Well, here on the rest of the menu, another whistleblower linked to Boeing has ended up dead under suspicious circumstances. Now, it might just be exactly what it seems to be. The guy died of a bacterial infection, or maybe he didn't. The timing is odd. That's why it's suspicious. The Arizona State Senate finally voted to repeal that 1864 abortion ban, but because these Federalist Society Christo-fascists know how to tweak the law, the ban will go into effect, albeit temporarily. Thanks. And a 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit ruled the ex-FBI informant with ties to Russia and charged with lying about the Bidens must remain jailed while awaiting trial. Why don't they just do that with, Sleepy Donnie? I know. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Warsaw's main synagogue was attacked with fire bombs overnight, but sustained minimal damage. And a senior Australian minister refused to comment on media reports that Indian spies were secretly expelled 4 years ago. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left is our Patreon link, and if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, I got to tell you, it really does help us pay down the bills and all the other costs running this powerhouse of resistance. So please do if you can, and thank you to those of you who have. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on social media, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, except when we all take care of it. But thank you, Tom, for everything. Follow me on social media at Justice Putnam, just to remind you that I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. And that way you have quick access to the actual reporters and reportage by going to my social media feed, and that'll take you to Daily Co's. I know there's some steps there, but at least you get to read the actual article. So follow me at Justice Putnam. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, even Audible. So do it. Do it! Okay, let's tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it is by Dominic Gates and Lauren Rosenblatt from the Seattle Times. Joshua Dean, a former quality auditor at Boeing supplier Spirit Aerosystems and one of the first whistleblowers to allege Spirit leadership had ignored manufacturing defects on the 737 MAX, died yesterday morning, Tuesday, after a struggle with a sudden, fast-spreading infection. Known as Josh, Dean lived in Wichita, Kansas, where Spirit is based. He was 45, had been in good health, and was noted for having a healthy lifestyle. He died after 2 weeks in critical condition, his aunt, Carol Parsons, said. Spirit spokesperson Joe Buccino said, "Our thoughts are with Josh Dean's family. This sudden loss is stunning news here and for his loved ones." Is it stunning? Dean had given a deposition in a Spirit shareholder lawsuit and also filed a complaint with the FAA alleging serious gross misconduct by senior quality management of the 737 production line at Spirit. I bet they wanted him dead. Spirit fired Dean in April of 2023, and he had filed a complaint with the Department of Labor alleging his termination was in retaliation for raising concerns related to aviation safety. Parsons said Dean became ill and went to the hospital because he was having trouble breathing just over 2 weeks ago. He was intubated and developed pneumonia and then a serious bacterial infection, MRSA. His condition deteriorated rapidly, and he was airlifted from Wichita to a hospital in Oklahoma City. There he was put on an ECMO machine, which circulates and oxygenates a patient's blood outside the body, taking over the heart and lung function when a patient's organs don't work on their own. His mother posted a message on Friday on Facebook relating all those details and saying that Dean was fighting for his life. He was heavily sedated and put on dialysis. A CT scan indicated he had suffered a stroke and was brain dead. Megan Vasquez and Yvonne Sanchez brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The Arizona State Senate voted yesterday, Wednesday, to repeal a Civil War-era ban on nearly all abortions that, because of procedural hurdles, remains on track to temporarily take effect in June. The vote in the Republican-led Senate followed passage in the Arizona House last week. The ban briefly went into effect after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022 before being blocked by the courts, and was revived by the state's highest court on April 9th in a ruling that spurred public outcry and threatened to upend politics in the state during an election year. The repeal of the 1864 law is the latest twist in the battle after the decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health to determine the future of reproductive rights in the state, setting the stage for Arizona to return to a 15-week abortion ban and for voters to potentially decide whether to enshrine abortion rights in the state's constitution in a November ballot measure. Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs is expected to sign the repeal into law today, but the timing for when it can legally go into effect could still complicate abortion access in the state. Durkin Richer of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A federal appeals court yesterday, Wednesday, rejected a bid to release from jail a former FBI informant who is charged with fabricating a multi-million-dollar bribery scheme involving President Joe Biden's family. Alexander Smirnoff's lawyers had urged the California-based Ninth U.S. Circuit of Court of Appeals to overturn a lower court judge's order that the man remain behind bars while he awaits trial. But a three-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit said the lower court was right to conclude that Smirnoff is a flight risk, and there are no conditions of release that would reasonably assure that he shows up in court. The appeals court also denied Smirnoff's request for temporary release, which his lawyers had pressed for so he could undergo eye surgery for glaucoma. He can get the procedure in jail, you know. Smirnoff was arrested in February on charges accusing him of falsely telling his FBI handler that executives from the Ukrainian energy company Burisma had paid Biden and Hunter $5 million each around 2015. The claim became central to the Republican impeachment inquiry of President Biden in Congress. Smirnoff has pleaded not guilty. U.S. District Judge Otis Wright II in Los Angeles in February ordered Smirnoff to remain jailed while he awaits trial, reversing a different judge's ruling, releasing him on GPS monitoring. Smirnoff was rearrested at his lawyer's office in Vegas 2 days after the magistrate judge released him from custody. Smirnoff's lawyers have noted that their client has no criminal history and argued that keeping him locked up will make it difficult for him to help his legal team prepare for his trial. Really? Urging the judge to keep him in jail, prosecutors revealed Smirnoff has reported to the FBI, having extensive contact with officials associated with Russian intelligence, and claimed that those officials were the ones who passed him the story about Hunter Biden. Well. Okay, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, this is Your Health Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
We bring you the latest vital health news, discoveries that affect your body and your mind.
And we break down the medical research to help you stay healthy. I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
We're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today on the podcast menu, we've got food. There is renewed interest in using food as preventive medicine, offering patients vegetables or entire meals to keep them healthier and more resistant to disease. But will prescribing produce really work? A lot of people think so, but it's been a little hard to prove.
People talk a lot about the health benefits of individual foods. I hear a lot about blueberries. They're supposed to be filled with antioxidants that stop cell damage, for instance. You got one, Tanya?
Yeah, kale. It's a superfood, or so they say. It packs a ton of vitamin K and vitamin C.
Okay, I confess I know very little about kale and have no idea how I would eat it.
Well, I actually know a pretty good recipe for massaged kale salad.
Massage?
Yeah, you just take raw kale and rinse it, and then you add lemon juice and olive oil and salt and pepper, and just, massage it until it tenderizes into a nice salad.
Cool. I'll totally take your word for that. The other food I was thinking about was my grandmother's chicken soup. It was supposed to be a cold remedy. Actually, it was supposed to be a remedy for just about anything in my family.
That sounds tasty. While we're at it, I believe that chocolate croissants are scientifically proven to be good for the soul. But don't fact check me on that.
Oh, no fact checking here. Debates about the health values of specific foods go back and forth anyway, and you're probably tired of the whiplash. So today we are not going to talk about blueberries or broccoli or chocolate croissants by themselves.
We're going to talk about a trend in medicine in which doctors prescribe healthy food, like bags of fresh produce, just like they'd prescribe blood pressure medication. And a colleague of ours just wrote a news article about this food is medicine movement in the journal JAMA.
What food is medicine is, what makes it distinctive, is it is getting people healthy food or groceries that will create healthy food with the explicit involvement of the healthcare system. So prescribing medically tailored meals or prescribing groceries or actually giving people prescriptions to go and get produce for free.
That's Maren McKenna.
I am a journalist. I focus on science and public health. I'm the author of a couple of books and a science writing professor and a contributing editor at Scientific American.
It's great to have you here, Maren.
Happy to be here.
Now, can you tell us how a food is medicine program works?
In what I think is the most interesting example, there's a very famous physician in Michigan. Her name is Mona Hanna-Attisha.
We know that name because Hanna-Attisha is the pediatrician who helped expose the high levels of lead in Flint, Michigan's drinking water a decade ago, levels that were really toxic.
But she also is an activist for children's nutrition. And since 2015, through her own pediatric clinic, which is part of Michigan State University's College of Medicine, she has been writing produce prescriptions for a farmer's market that was in the same building as her pediatric clinic.
In fact, Hanna-Attisha moved her office above the market to make it easier for patients to get their food.
She moved into the second story of a freestanding brick and mortar permanent farmer's market in downtown Flint, Michigan. And for every child who came into that clinic, she gave that child's family initially a $5 voucher for produce downstairs. It's now $15, and they've expanded to a couple of different sites.
Sounds like a really clever idea. Has it actually made people healthier, though?
Well, it's certainly improved the kids' nutrition. The Flint program has written 55,000 prescriptions for this food and given out the vouchers. Now, the amount of fruits and vegetables and fiber and whole grains and dairy that the children ate went up, though it's still not at the levels of federal nutrition guidelines, Marin says.
Now, you and Marin talked about doctors giving out these vouchers like prescriptions. Yet medical insurance doesn't pay for food, right? So where does the money come from?
That's a good question. In Flint, Hana Atisha raises money from private charities. Nationally, big foundations are getting involved. The Rockefeller Foundation pledged $100 million, for instance. And in 2022, the White House held a nutrition summit, and after that, federal agencies committed to spending $8 billion on nutrition programs.
That's a lot of dough.
Oh, you had to go there.
Sorry. Well, anyway, I'm still wondering, does this investment in nutrition actually lead to lower risk of disease?
I did ask Marin about that.
Yes, there are some studies that show positive effects in things like reducing hemoglobin, A1C, reducing blood pressure, reducing body mass index.
Higher A1C levels are a risk factor for diabetes. One of the stronger studies was just presented at an American Heart Association conference in March. It looked at what happened in a free produce delivery program in Alameda County, California. After a year, people getting their deliveries had lower A1C and less bad cholesterol than people who didn't get the food delivered.
Wow, interesting. I know there have also been some studies that suggest certain diets can improve specific aspects of health. There's the DASH diet for high blood pressure. It emphasizes fruit, vegetables, whole grains, and low-fat dairy. And it cuts out alcohol and foods with salt, the good stuff that is actually bad for you. There was an analysis combining the results of several diet studies, and it turned out DASH significantly lowered blood pressure, even more than the Mediterranean diet, which lets you have salt and some red wine.
But Marin says there are not a lot of food as medicine studies like the one in California.
The enthusiasm for it is racing ahead of the evidence. And there probably are some good reasons for that. First, it's just a really new concept to actually do this in a measurable medical way, as opposed to just bringing someone a pan of lasagna or a basket of fruit. The second is that doing nutritional studies in free living humans is really hard to do.
As Marin writes in her story, though, more studies are ramping up. The AHA is funding 19 new food as medicine research projects, and the National Institutes of Health has approval to start several research initiatives focused on the idea. Food voucher programs have been around for decades, of course, mostly through the Department of Agriculture. You can use them at local supermarkets. What makes this new effort different is that it empowers healthcare workers to prescribe healthy food rather than just vaguely advise people to eat healthier.
People in this field say, well, we've been kind of hampered in what we were able to say to people beyond, well, you should eat a healthier diet. And then we send them out the door. Where food as medicine potentially takes this conversation is from, I think you should eat more lettuce and carrots. Good luck. See you next year. To, I think you should be eating healthier food. And I have a specific intervention that can help you do that. I can sign you up for a program that will bring you dinner 4 nights a week for a month. Let's see if that makes a difference to your blood work.
And if these interventions are convincing, maybe they'll make a difference in something else, making insurance companies pay for good food and good health. Your Health Quickly is produced by Corinne Leung, Madison Goldberg, Jeff Delvisio, and by us. It's edited by Ella Fetter and Alexa Lim. Our music is composed by Dominic Smith.
Our show is part of Scientific American's podcast, Science Quickly. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And now, some bittersweet news. This will be our last episode of Your Health Quickly. After 3 years and 2 months, the show as it currently exists will be ending as we transition to a new podcast format.
We launched this podcast in February of 2021. It was called COVID Quickly. We had 3 people and a humble goal to quickly keep listeners up to date on the latest developments in the pandemic.
And we've done that. Every 2 weeks, we brought you stories on everything you needed to know to stay safe and informed as we all weathered this viral storm.
In March of 2023, we broadened our scope to a range of other health topics. We brought in a bunch of smart scientific experts, producers, and editors. And the show became the Your Health Quickly you know and maybe even kind of love.
We produced a total of 73 episodes. We'd like to thank our editors, producers, and guests, and all of you who listened to us and wrote in to share your questions and feedback.
But just because YHQ won't continue in its current format doesn't mean that you will be rid of us.
That's right. We'll still be serenading your ears with important and fascinating developments in health and medicine. And of course, some punishing puns. Stay tuned. And now, one last time, for Your Health Quickly, I'm Tanya Lewis.
And I'm Josh Fishman.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government buy-in for the people. Our series this week on dark money showed how operatives use nonprofit organizations and limited liability corporations to funnel anonymous cash into our elections. We all know it's bad, but what's being done about it? In November, Arizona voters passed the Voters' Right to Know Act by a 72% vote. It requires groups or corporations spending money over a certain threshold in local or statewide elections to disclose donors over $5,000. As we've reported, Americans for Prosperity is challenging it in federal court and other groups in state court. In 2019, New York enacted a bill which requires members, shareholders of LLCs making political donations to disclose their names and apply that amount to an individual's campaign donation limits. But until 2023, it had not been enforced, and as we reported, those rules may have been ignored in the 2022 governor's race. 22 states have banned any corporate contributions directly to a candidate, but 5 states allow unlimited contributions, and most states still allow corporations to donate at the individual's limit. The Minnesota legislature is considering the Democracy for People Act, a sweeping voter access and anti-corruption package, which includes disclosure measures similar to New York and Arizona. And the reintroduction of the federal Freedom to Vote Act is expected in the coming weeks. Exposing dark money can't come soon enough. We have more at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1968. That was the day 4,000 auto workers at Chrysler's Dodge main plant in Hamtramck, Michigan, walked out in a wildcat strike. They protested assembly line speed up, but also racist foremen and the firings of 7 co-workers. The strike was significant for many reasons. It injected black power politics within the union movement. The CIO had made unprecedented gains in the 30s and 40s through interracial organizing and combating Jim Crow on the job. However, racial discrimination persisted in industries across America. The Wildcat shocked the UAW leadership, having prided itself in its early and central involvement involvement in the civil rights movement. By 1968, many African Americans grew frustrated with the slow pace of reform and found the militancy of the Black Power movement attractive. According to historian Robert Weir, black auto worker activists considered many UAW officials paternalistic, condescending, and out of touch with the changing urban realities. Many of their white coworkers joined them on the picket lines. Black activists at Dodge, Maine condemned the UAW for failing to address the disproportionate racial discrimination they faced on the job. They demanded a separate contract that spoke to the needs of black workers and the right to bargain directly with the company. The Wildcat immediately grew into the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement and inspired similar groupings at other area auto plants. Those white workers who were initially sympathetic worried that Drum's demands would serve to weaken and ultimately split the union movement along racial lines. Drum would continue to demand for safer working conditions, shorter hours, and higher wages, an end to the Vietnam War, and more black union officials and supervisors. The movement was short-lived, however, but continues to be revered among Detroit activists today. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid to upper 60s. Cloudy conditions at the moment, but we've had a bit of rain overnight, and it apparently just concluded for a while, just a while ago. And we will be partly cloudy this afternoon with winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. A few passing clouds tonight, otherwise generally clear, with lows in the low 40s, darn it. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Do not freeze my citrus. But we have cloudy with light rain developing tomorrow, and then throughout the day, highs in the mid to upper 60s. Winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing with it about a quarter inch of rain, and then rain throughout the whole weekend, with Saturday and Sunday having an inch each. Say that real fast. Looks like we'll have rain throughout Monday as well, and we'll see how far into the week it goes. Looks like grass pollen is now rated as very high here in our town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 25 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is very high at level 8. Haven't seen that for a while, so we will definitely take care even though there's a cloud cover. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.05 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 91%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 60 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 55 degrees with rain and a flood advisory. Looks like Rome is 64 degrees and partly cloudy with a high wind advisory. Kabul is 58 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 62 and cloudy. Tokyo is 58 and clear. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 48 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 58 and sunny with a small craft advisory. Chicago, Illinois is 63 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York is 62 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. and that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Of the Associated Press World Desk brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. Warsaw's main synagogue was attacked with fire bombs by an unknown perp, but sustained minimal damage and nobody was hurt, Poland's chief rabbi said yesterday, Wednesday. The incident was strongly condemned by political leaders. The attack on the Nozick synagogue happened around 1 a.m. The country's American-born chief rabbi, Michael Shudrich, said the synagogue was hit with 3 firebombs or Molotov cocktails and only sustained minimal damage by tremendous luck or miracle. What's the diff? Hours later, the ambassadors of the U.S. and Israel gathered at the spot with Jewish community leaders and Polish officials representing the president, the national parliament, and the city government to condemn the attack and express solidarity with Poland's Jewish community. A black area that was the result of where the firebombs hit was visible near a ground floor window of the synagogue, the only surviving pre-war Jewish house of prayer in the Polish capital. The Nozick synagogue is a symbol of survival, and we stand in solidarity with Nozick today and tomorrow, U.S. Ambassador Mark Brzezinski told reporters at a briefing held near the damaged facade. It is unclear who carried out the attack, but police have opened an investigation. Poland's President Duda wrote that he condemned the shameful attack, saying there is no place for anti-Semitism in Poland. There is no place for hatred in Poland. Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski noted that the incident fell on the 20th anniversary of Poland joining the EU, along with 9 other countries, most of them Central European nations, that had been under the Soviet sphere of influence for decades. Rod McGurk at the Associated Press World Desk brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A senior Australian government minister said yesterday, Wednesday, the bilateral relationship with India was good and had improved in recent years, but declined to comment on reports that 2 Indian spies were secretly expelled from Australia 4 years ago. Treasurer Jim Chalmers was asked during a television interview whether India could be considered Australia's friend, after Australian news media and the Washington Post reported the 2 intelligence operatives' quiet expulsion. Chalmers said, "I don't want to get into those kinds of operational issues in any way." Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Foreign Ministry Penny Wong deflected questions yesterday as well, using the government's standard line that they did not comment on intelligence matters. India is an increasingly important trading partner of Australia, which is trying to reduce its economic reliance on China. India and Australia are also developing closer military ties as members of the Quad Security Dialogue that also includes the United States and Japan. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.